Dr. J. Buzz von Ornsteiner is a forensic psychologist. Dr. Buzz, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Well, it is always a pleasure. Dr. Buzz, let's talk about this defendant. We know that she has a diminished mental capacity, and yet she is competent to stand trial. How would you assess her?
One is to look at this client's history. We don't know a lot about Kathleen Hilton's background. We're told that she has an IQ of 71, but that is just a number, and that she's mild in terms of mentally challenged. People that are mentally challenged in the mild range have the capability to do many, many things. We oftentimes don't look at their strength, but we're told that she can't read or write. That seems very confused to me. A person who is in the mild range should be able to read and write, should be able to function independently, should be able to work in a supervised setting at the very least. She was a mother. She did raise children. She did function independently, but we don't seem to see that. She seems to be acting inappropriate in the courtroom. She seems disinterested. She seems disconnected.
Even smiling and laughing at some points and playing with her hair. We have reports that she takes off her shoes during testimony and puts her legs up cross-legged in the seat.
Well, you're right. That seems inappropriate or impulsive behavior. She certainly acts inappropriately, but laughing could be a strategy that Ms. Hilton uses. You know, I know people that aren't cognitively impaired, and they still laugh sometimes in inappropriate moments. We have to look at what's going on within her mind. We're also told that she has a delusional disorder. We're also told that she's schizophrenic. But within the courtroom, that disinterest just could be that. She's been in prison for 10 years.
Right.
She may not think she's coming out. She may have nowhere to go when she gets released.
And Dr. Buzz, that's exactly where I was going to go with this. This woman has been incarcerated for 10 years. Most people who are incarcerated get little or no mental health treatment. I don't know whether she's medicated. She may very well be medicated, but that has to have a deleterious effect on her functioning.
You're absolutely right. I was in the prison for a year as a psychologist, and I can tell you the person starts to decompensate. We all need support services, whether we have a disability or not. We all need direction. We all need to have structure. And I don't know if the support services are there. I don't know if her children visit her. I don't know if she has friends. I don't know if she has any perception that there are people out there that care for her. I don't know if she has a social worker or a psychologist that's working with her within the facility.
Probably
all
not.
Those things.
You know, one of the crying shames in our system is, look, 9 out of 10 people who are in prison are going to get out. Only 1 in 10 are lifers. And what that means for the rest of us is that people are going to get out and be functioning back amongst us. And if we don't give them mental health services in prison, we're only harming ourselves. I mean, forget about compassion, forget about giving people basic dignity. How about protecting the rest of us? And yet very few people behind bars get mental health services, and I just think that's appalling. What kind of services might benefit her if they were available to her, Dr. Buzz?
Within the prison system you're talking about? Yes. Well, first of all, that she has structure and direction. I understand she's working, but I don't know if that job she has within the correctional facility is challenging. I don't know why she isn't in a GED program. She has the capabilities to learn to read and write. I don't know why her social worker or her psychologist, if in fact she has one, is directing her finally at 62 years of age to learn to read and write. She has the cognitive capability to learn to read and write, and that could help her during these stressful times, lower her anxiety. I don't know if she has a good therapeutic alliance with anyone within the correctional facility, or if she is taking medication, if she's being overly medicated. And that may be a reaction in court also.
Boy, you really raise all of the problems that people face. So, Dr. Buzz, this is not an insanity defense case, and she is able, I would assume you think, to have the mental intent to start a fire. And if she intends to start a fire and it kills 5 people, accidentally or not, that is felony murder, and that's enough to convict her, right?
Yes, and I also think we need to look at why she committed that fire. In her limited capacity, she thought that if she started a fire, that would damage the building, and then that girlfriend and her children would have to move back in with her and her son. That is somewhat logical. I know many people who do not have cognitive impairments that think if there was a tragedy of some kind, that would bring the family unit closer together. And then we also have to look at the confession. She was confessing for starting the fire, but her son had threatened his girlfriend that very day, saying he was going to burn down that house. So false confessions are extremely common with people who have cognitive impairments and are young. They're more impressionable, they're more easily swayed, and where else do you find false confessions but a mother who's trying to save her son from prison? We've got to examine all the areas of this cognitively impaired witness.
I think that's a very compelling argument, by the way. Dr. Buzz, we're taking a look at that door. There's also a chunk of wall of the building that's been brought into the courtroom. Do you think that has an effect on the jury?
I think everything can have an effect on the jury on an emotional level. There's been 5 people died in this fire, and that affects us, and the witnesses affect us very strongly. It's how they interpret Miss Hilton's behavior. If she feels disconnected, if she looks disconnected, if she doesn't look interested, we have a stigma in our society where we tend to feel a discomfort with the mentally ill, with the cognitively impaired, and that can work against Ms. Hilton. She's got to be sympathetic, and if there is mental health issues, we've got to hear about them to make her more sympathetic.
Well, I think that's a very good point. I think that is well said. People do have a certain level of discomfort with mentally ill people. I've had several severely mentally ill people in my family, so I always grew up with it, and I'm not particularly uncomfortable with mentally ill people. But I think you're right, because of a lack of interaction, a lack of mainstreaming, many people are. Dr. Buzz, if you were advising the defense, how would you suggest that, if, let's say she doesn't testify, I would think she's not going to testify, how would you suggest they make her a little bit more sympathetic?
By working with her. I see them talking to her occasionally, maybe by holding her, by talking with her, showing that she has the cognitive ability to interact. I would actually want some directives so she could behave a little bit more appropriately. If that's who she is, she needs directives.
She may not be capable.
Well, the thing is, with good support services, with a good directive, she can dress more appropriately. If she is disinterested, maybe she can write notes, even though she hasn't learned to read and write. I know in past, when cognitively impaired are sitting there in court, it is boring, and you do become distracted. You need things, you need malleables, you need something to keep your hands busy. You need to have some kind of focus or attention. I'm not asking her to draw in a coloring book.
Well, you know, it's funny that you should mention that. And I like the word malleables, because we covered the case of John Cooey down in Florida, who ultimately was convicted of raping and murdering little Jessica Lunsford. And he actually was allowed to bring a coloring book into the courtroom, and he sat there with crayons and colored while witnesses were testifying. I thought that was extraordinary and frankly disrespectful, but he was allowed to do it, and maybe that's because that's something that he needed, the malleables, as you described them, Dr. Buzz.
We all need things to focus our attention. Listen, after 3 hours in a class, I get very distractible, I get very unfocused, and sitting in court day after day after day is very, very difficult. You also have a woman who is 10 years in prison. You also have a woman with a history, probably, of being very distractible, lacking a focused attention, not doing well in school, not doing well in situations where she just had to sit quiet. We all actually don't do well in those situations.
Well, that's true. I don't like to sit for too long either. In fact, during this 2-hour show, I usually have to get up and stretch during at least one of the breaks, because I'm not good at sitting for a long period of time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for having me.